Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about my Week 6 starts of the week for the 2024 fantasy football season. A very important episode to get your lineups looking right so you can get a dub in Week 6. Today is Friday, October 11th, 2024. So naturally, the Thursday game already happened. That was between the 49ers and the Seahawks. 49ers got that win in Seattle. So we're just going to be looking ahead at the remaining players on the slate for those Sunday and Monday games. But before we get into the starts of the week, please make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast. And if you do want video for the pod, head over to the YouTube channel. Just look up Fantasy Football Prodigy on YouTube, and you'll see this ugly guy yapping about football. All right, I think we're ready to get into our starts of the week. We're going to go position by position, starting with quarterback. I have a couple starts of the week at the quarterback position. So, my first quarterback start of the week, Kirk Cousins of the Atlanta Falcons on the road against the Carolina Panthers. This game has a 47-point over-under, which is pretty juicy. Carolina gives up the 6th most points per game to quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins had a slow start to the year, which makes sense. New offense coming over from the Vikings, coming off an Achilles at kind of an older age for a quarterback. It makes sense that it wasn't perfect. It was also against the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1, so it makes sense that things weren't peachy to start the year, but Kirk Cousins and this offense have looked much better lately, especially last week when Kirk Cousins had 500 yards and 4 touchdowns in that crazy overtime game against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Nobody should be expecting a repeat of those type of numbers, but in this matchup, he should be able to get the ball to his weapons in Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and hopefully Kyle Pitts at tight end, and have himself a really good game, especially when you consider the fact that the Panthers with Andy Dalton at quarterback actually have an offense and have a chance of being able to keep up and score. I like Kirk Cousins in week 6 as a low quarterback 1 play. My next quarterback start of the week, Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears at home versus the Jacksonville Jags. Jacksonville gives up the most points per game to quarterbacks in the entire NFL, so the matchup is stellar. Caleb Williams, the rookie, had a slow start to his career, but he has been looking much better as the season has gone along, and with that, he's been putting up more and more fantasy stats, loading up that box score. He was the quarterback 6 last week against the Carolina Panthers with 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, also added 34 yards on the ground. Caleb Williams is at home. It's a great matchup, and I think he can keep the momentum going here. I like him as a low quarterback 1 play in week 6. We're going to move on to the running back position. Running back start of the week, we're going to start with Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans at home versus the Indianapolis Colts, who give up the 9th most points per game to running backs. Outside of one bad game, Tony Pollard has actually been really solid this season. He was disappointing last year for the Cowboys for where you had to draft him. He fell in drafts this year, but he's been a really solid running back 2 this season in 2024. He's the clear lead back over Tajay Spears in that backfield. It's a good matchup at home, and I really like Tony Pollard this week as a solid high running back 2 play in week 6. My next running back start of the week, it's a bit of a shocker. He wouldn't normally be in a segment like this, but we're going to go with Breece Hall of the New York Jets at home against the Buffalo Bills. The superstar running back started the season hot as expected. He was the running back 6 overall through the first 3 weeks. Things were great, but the last 2 weeks have been absolutely dreadful for Breece Hall, and he was the running back 51 over that 2-week span. Now, he did have a couple tough matchups in that span against the Denver Broncos and the Minnesota Vikings defenses, but even with those matchups, he's still been extra disappointing, even when you factor in the tough defenses that he's faced. But he's just too talented of a player to be held down like this for too long. The New York Jets are shaking things up after firing head coach Robert Saleh and giving Nathaniel Hackett's play calling duty to Todd Downing. We'll see how that turns out, but hopefully the shakeup just means getting Breece Hall involved more, getting the ball in the running game and the passing game. This is a great spot for a bounce back game at home against the Bills, who give up the most points per game to the running back position in the entire NFL. Keep Breece Hall in your lineup as a mid-tier running back one play in week 6. We're going to move on to the wide receiver position. Before we do that, if you are enjoying the podcast, please remember to drop a like if you can, like wherever you are listening. And more importantly, make sure to follow or subscribe so that you can stay tuned to the newest episodes and become a fantasy football prodigy. Because, we're here to talk about football and have a good time, but more importantly, we're here to win championships, win titles. Okay? You can't do that without being a fantasy football prodigy. So we're going to move on to the wide receiver position. My first wide receiver start of the week, Darnell Mooney of the Atlanta Falcons on the road against the Carolina Panthers. Like I said before, this game has a 47-point over-under, and the Carolina Panthers give up the 10th most points per game to the wide receiver position on the year. Darnell Mooney is the wide receiver 14 overall on the season, and he was the wide receiver 3 last week in that crazy game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where Kirk Cousins threw for 504. Like I said, I like Kirk Cousins this week as a solid quarterback play, and Drake London at wide receiver is obviously an auto start, but I also think that the wide receiver 2 on this offense, Darnell Mooney, can continue to get it done in this matchup, especially if we see this game hit the over and we see lots of offense overall and it becomes a little bit of a back and forth. My only worry with Darnell Mooney would be if Drake London soaks up all the passing game production and if they get Bijan Robinson, superstar running back, going on the ground and he kind of takes the game over, because the Panthers are just not a great defense overall. So they could run the game a fair amount in this game as well, but I still like Darnell Mooney as a low wide receiver 2 play in week 6. My next wide receiver start of the week is Jayden Reed of the Green Bay Packers at home versus the Arizona Cardinals. This game has a nice, healthy 47-point over-under. Jayden Reed is clearly the guy that you want in this passing game on this offense over Christian Watson, over Dontavian Wicks, over Romeo Doubs. He's a great playmaker who has been great with Jordan Love on the field at quarterback. He should have himself a day against the Arizona Cardinals, especially if both offenses are humming and it becomes a shootout. Jayden Reed is a mid-tier wide receiver 1 play in week 6. Another wide receiver start of the week that I would be looking forward to starting in week 6 is DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears at home versus the Jacksonville Jags. Jacksonville gives up the most points per game to the wide receiver position in the entire NFL. So obviously the matchup is there. Like I said, I like Caleb Williams and the passing game in this game. And even though the receiving room is a little crowded with Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze at wide receiver and Cole Kmet at tight end also involved, DJ Moore appears to be the alpha receiver on this team. And I believe he has the most potential to have a big blow-up game out of all of the options on the Bears. It was a rocky start to the season for the offense in general, which it makes sense given that it wasn't a great start for rookie quarterback Caleb Williams to start the year either. But as the rookie continues to find his footing, which it appears that he has been doing lately, DJ Moore should only benefit from that. Oh, and also to note, I did trade away DJ Moore right before week 5 when he finished as the wide receiver 4 on the week with 25 fantasy points. I traded him away in my dynasty league. So if nothing else, my dynasty team curse all but ensures that DJ Moore is going to be great moving forward, and he's going to have a great game in this awesome matchup. The matchup is there. Caleb Williams is improving, and DJ Moore is a great player. I love him as a mid wide receiver 1 play in week 6. And in my last wide receiver start of the week, I almost didn't include this guy, but I thought I would just because, Jayden Reed and DJ Moore are kind of upper echelon players. If you have Darnell Mooney, you probably have seen how good he is. You see the matchup, and there's a good chance that he's in your lineup, regardless of what I tell you. But I wanted to give you a bit of a deeper wide receiver start if you're desperate with bye weeks or injuries. We're going to go with Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys at home versus the Detroit Lions. This game has a 52.5 point over-under, which is the highest of the week. Jalen Tolbert has had his moments this season, and last week, in week 5, he stepped up in a tough matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers with Brandon Cooks out with that infection. He saw 10 targets and turned that into 7 for 87 and 1 touchdown. Brandon Cooks is still out in week 6, and now Dallas is taking on the Detroit Lions, who give up the 4th most points per game to wide receivers. And like I said, this game could be an exciting offensive game with a lot of points scored. So I want pieces of this game. Jalen Tolbert is not a must start, but if you're dealing with bye weeks or injuries, or if you're in a deeper league, he is a solid streamer, a solid DFS play. I like him as a low wide receiver 3, high wide receiver 4 play in week 6. Those were my wide receiver starts of the week. We're going to move on to the tight end position. My first tight end start of the week is Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys at home versus the Detroit Lions. A lot of the same things I said about his teammate, Jalen Tolbert. So obviously, just to kind of give you some context as well, I'm telling you to start Jalen Tolbert and Jake Ferguson. I'm not going to tell you to start CeeDee Lamb, superstar receiver, because he should be in your lineup every week. CeeDee Lamb might be the best receiver to play in all of fantasy this week. So, I'm trying not to give you guys super obvious calls. That's why it was kind of weird to put like Breece Hall in this video, because it's like normally he's a guy that you wouldn't talk about, but I thought I should include Breece Hall because he's been really bad lately. And like, I want people to realize like you should keep him in your lineup because there's a good chance he bounces back. But as I was saying, a lot of parallels with Jalen Tolbert. Like I said, it's a 52.5 point over-under this week, highest of the week on the slate in week 6. I made Jake Ferguson a start of the week last week in a gross matchup against the Steelers, and he finished with a solid 10 points and half PPR. I made that call because I think Jake Ferguson is an every week start based on his involvement and just how necessary he is to this Dallas Cowboys offense, especially with wide receiver Brandon Cooks missing time. Now he actually gets a more exciting matchup in what could be a high-scoring game. Jake Ferguson is the tight end 6 on the season in points per game. Fire him up as a high tight end 1 play in week 6 against the Lions. And then finally, my last tight end start of the week is going to be Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers at home versus the Arizona Cardinals. I made Tucker Kraft a tight end start of the week last week against the LA Rams, and he finished as the tight end 1 overall on the week with 4 receptions, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Tucker Kraft has established himself as the clear lead tight end over Luke Musgrave, and in the 2 games since Jordan Love came back from injury, he has been the tight end 2 and the tight end 1 overall in each of those weeks. With the other weapons in Green Bay, just kind of, how do I say this? There's a lot of mouths to feed in Green Bay. So just with the fact that there's a lot of receiving options in Green Bay, and when you combine that with the fact that no tight end is really ever extremely consistent outside of prime Travis Kelce, prime Gronk, Tucker Kraft will have his games where he's not utilized as much as you would hope. Some of these other guys on this offense have a game, but we've seen the upside out of Tucker Kraft and we've seen his involvement. It's a good offense. And particularly if this game becomes a shootout between these 2 great quarterbacks, you want that upside in your lineup over a tight end that really doesn't offer much upside. So for me, in week 6, Tucker Kraft is a mid-tier tight end 1 play, and you're hoping he hits some big plays and has another great performance for fantasy. Really quick, before we go, I'm going to do a quick recap of last week. This is something that I said I wanted to do in the past and have kind of been forgetting to do, but just to kind of evaluate our process and see how we're doing. So we're going to do a super quick recap of last week's start of the week. So I made Brock Purdy a start of the week last week. He was a quarterback 17 with 15 points. So that was definitely disappointing. And then I also made Jordan Love a start of the week. He was the quarterback 14 with about 17 points according to Fantasy Pro scoring. So that wasn't as good as I had hoped. They both kind of disappointed a little bit. But this week, we're hoping that our quarterback starts get better. Jordan Mason was a start of the week last week. He was all right, 8.3 points, but obviously you were hoping for much more out of Jordan Mason. And he did leave that game on Thursday early with an injury. So that was technically the game after I made him a start of the week. But in week 6, he got hurt, played one snap after halftime, and then left again. I believe it was an AC joint injury, if I'm not mistaken. But moving on, my other start of the week, Chuba Hubbard. This is where we saw some actual success here. He was the running back 9 overall on the week with 15.5 points. So we exploited that Bears matchup. Even with the Bears leading in that game, the Panthers were still able to run the ball a little bit, which we lucked out a little bit with that, honestly. But the Bears give it up more on the ground than in the passing game. So that's something that we should remember moving forward as we kind of evaluate defenses and get more data as the season goes along. Jayden Reed was one of my starts of the week. He was all right. He was a wide receiver 2, 11.7 points, just barely a wide receiver 2. Every wide receiver is going to have their down weeks. That's another reason why I made Jayden Reed a start of the week again, is because he didn't have that big blow up game, but I still think he should be treated as a borderline must start this week, because every receiver is going to, not have a great week every single week. Very few receivers do that where they're really solid every week. And even then, he was still pretty good last week. So, and then Dontavian Wicks, I paired with Jayden Reed as a start of the week, and he was really bad for fantasy. The process was good. He saw targets, and he dropped the ball a little bit and just wasn't working out. But he had 7 targets, only turned into 2 for 20. So very disappointing out of Dontavian Wicks. Monitor the news to see if Christian Watson comes back. If Christian Watson is back, I'm probably going to go away from Wicks. But if Watson is out again, I think Dontavian Wicks is still a solid play, even though last week was disappointing. I think there's a good chance he bounces back if Watson is out. That should just increase his likelihood of getting targets. A good wide receiver start of the week last week was Brian Thomas Jr. of against the Indianapolis Colts, plays for the Jacksonville Jags. He was the wide receiver 9 on the week, tied with Mike Evans, 20.7 points, had that 85-yard touchdown, I think it was. Exploited that Colts matchup. He's a guy that should be in most lineups. I know I have a league where I have too many good players where I just can't fit him in the lineup this week, and he's playing the Bears this week, and like we said, they shut down the passing game, give it up on the ground. So Brian Thomas Jr. I like moving forward, but this week could be a little rough, but he's a guy that I want to get in lineups most weeks. And then another wide receiver start of the week for me last week was Amari Cooper, and it was there, dude. 8 points, just not connecting. Saw 10 targets. I love that. It was a great matchup, but it was 4 for 60. I heard some stat that Amari Cooper's catchable target rate is 45% or something, which I believe that was the number. Don't quote me on that, but I remember it was a really abysmal number from Deshaun Watson. And it's just take his targets and cut him in half, because half of them he has no chance of even catching, which is just unbelievable. Just crazy. And then my last wide receiver start of the week last week was Michael Pittman. If and only if Joe Flacco got the start. Flacco did start, and honestly, Pittman, he saw 8 targets, only 5 for 37, but we lucked out. He got in the end zone and was the wide receiver 22 on the week. So Joe Flacco, he Josh Downs was kind of the guy that actually had the good game, but Michael Pittman is dealing with a bit of an injury. I heard it was possible that he would be sent to IR, but I'm seeing a report right now that said he's listed as questionable for the game against the Titans, and he logged a full practice on Friday, dealing with a back injury. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. That's another reason why I give you guys the date I'm recording, because you never know what's going to happen right after I, press stop recording. And then finally, Jake Ferguson was my tight end start of the week last week. he put up 10 points, really solid performance. If you can get 10 points out of your tight end, you'll take that, especially in a gross matchup against the Steelers. But in his 3 games back from injury, 11, 7, and 7 targets. He has been the tight end 3, 9, and 10. So at this point, in this tight end landscape, Jake Ferguson is an every week start. If you can buy low on him, I would. He hasn't had a big blow up game yet, but I think some touchdowns are in his future. And I would not be surprised at all if he has a touchdown this week. In fact, I might send out some offers for Jake Ferguson because I think by the end of the season, he's going to be one of those like top guys that you really want. Like, I don't think he has the upside of like Brock Bowers, George Kittle, Trey McBride, guys like that. But I think Jake Ferguson is going to be like a mid to high tight end 1 play in terms of seasonal rankings, like overall rankings that you want. And then Tucker Kraft was a tight end start of the week last week. He was a tight end 1 overall, like I said earlier. So he's a guy that should be owned in all leagues. I picked him up in a league where I also had Trey McBride. In that case, I'm going to be sticking with Trey McBride, but I did send out some trades. Like I did send out a trade where Tucker Kraft was in there, hoping that someone views him as a really good option moving forward. Because I think there's a really good chance that Tucker Kraft is a really solid option moving forward. But there is also the possibility that he's a tight end. There's other receivers there. Last week, no Christian Watson, no Romeo Doubs. It's very possible that moving forward he becomes somewhat inconsistent and touchdown dependent, just with all the weapons there and just the nature of the tight end position and the fact that there really aren't that many solid tight end starts every week. Like I don't think there's really anyone this season that you can look at and say they've been great all year. Everyone's had their kind of disappointments. So I just quickly wanted to go over those tight end and other all positions, not just tight end, all my starts of the week from last week. And then I guess while we're here, I can just take a quick little recap of the Seahawks and 49ers game. Just like a kind of a lightning recap. So I'm recording this Friday, October 11th. This game was last night. San Francisco 49ers on the road in Seattle. Thursday night football game. Let me pull up the box score here. I was not super prepared for this for some reason. I told myself that I would go over this, but I didn't have the tab open. Rookie mistake. All right. So 49ers get the win on the road in Seattle. Both teams are 3-3, but the Seahawks did start the year 3-0. So I believe they played 3 games in 11 days or something like that. And they've had a tougher schedule than they had at the start of the year. So there's some reasons for it, but yeah, not great. But yeah, the score was 36-24. Brock Purdy, 18 of 28, 255, and 3 touchdowns. I made the decision in the Guillotine League to play Brock Purdy over CJ Stroud, and I feel really good about that with him getting those 3 touchdowns. Jordan Mason was 9 for 73 in this game and 1 for 9 through the air before leaving with a shoulder injury. I believe it was an AC joint injury. He came back after halftime. Shanahan, the coach, was being interviewed. They asked about the status of Mason. He said Mason was good to go. He's back out there. I believe Mason played 1 more snap, or he got 1 more carry. And then he came out of the game and did not return. So Isaac Guerendo is the name to monitor. He went 10 for 99. Granted, one of his carries has, I believe it was the first carry of the last drive for the 49ers where they were trying to get a first down to seal the game. He ripped off a 76-yard run and kind of slid down at the goal line, which for Guerendo in hindsight, I bet he wishes he would have run it in because a few plays later, Kyle Juszczyk ran in a 6-yard touchdown. But if Jordan Mason misses time, Isaac Guerendo is a name to monitor. And also Patrick Taylor was involved at running back as well. Probably a name you're not familiar with, but he was 5 for 16 on the ground. Also caught his 1 target for 12 yards. As you guys know, if you've been listening to the podcast, I have Christian McCaffrey in Dynasty. I tried trading for Elijah Mitchell, and luckily it didn't go through because he got put on IR. And I drafted Isaac Guerendo in my rookie draft. And I had Jordan Mason on the roster, and I was like, well, I'm just going to drop Jordan Mason because I feel like Guerendo is probably the 3rd stringer, So if anything, Guarendo's the one I want to keep. And then lo and behold, Mitchell goes out. Christian McCaffrey gets ruled out before week 1. And then Jordan Mason becomes the starter, and he's a stud. So that definitely hurt my dynasty team. But I do have Guarendo. So, if Mason misses time, Guarendo's the guy you want. And then Deebo Samuel it seemed like he was more involved in the running game after Mason went out. I feel like he lined up in the backfield quite a bit. He was 4 for 15 on the ground. He was also 3 for 102 and a touchdown through the air, 76 yards, 5 targets. Luckily, he had that big touchdown play. And then George Kittle continues to dominate, 6 targets, 5 for 58 and 2 touchdowns. He might be the best tight end in fantasy right now. And then Brandon Ayuk, disappointing, 4 targets, 2 for 37. He had a bounce back game last week, kind of his best game of the season, but another down game. It hasn't been great for him this year. And then Jawan Jennings is clearly just a guy that you don't want to start right now unless someone misses time again with injury. 5 targets, which is, right in line with the other guys, 3 for 27. And then for the Seahawks, Geno Smith threw it 52 times in this game, completed 30 passes, 312 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Not great. Couple bad decisions, and I believe on a second interception to DK Metcalf, I think it was a little bit of a miscommunication where I think he thought Metcalf was going to kind of like cut the route like closer, like drive back to the quarterback, and he didn't. And I don't really know what happened on that play, but couple turnovers there. And then in the passing game, Tyler Lockett was the leading receiver, 4 for 65 and a touchdown on 8 targets. Noah Fant, solid little streamer if you're desperate at the position. He's been okay at times. He saw 6 targets, went 6 for 63. JSN saw 9 targets, 5 for 53. And then DK Metcalf led the team in targets with 11, only turned into 3 for 48. Very frustrating game for DK Metcalf managers. He had a super long, I think it was like a 52-yard touchdown called back on an illegal shift where I think it was Kenneth Walker. I don't think it was Zach Charbonnet. I think it was Ken Walker. Don't quote me on that. I don't want to throw shade at the wrong player, but they in the backfield sent him out in motion to the sideline, and he just never got set. Like he got out to the sideline, and then just kept kind of sliding and bouncing sideways instead of setting his feet, and it was an illegal shift. So it was a play. It was a penalty that did not affect the play at all. It was just a complete brain fart where it's whether that penalty happened or not, DK Metcalf was going to get that touchdown. It was just so frustrating. And DK Metcalf, he has been very frustrating lately just because he has been like a blade of grass or an inch away or a penalty away from having 2 or 3 more big touchdown plays the last few weeks. So if anything, if people are getting frustrated with Metcalf, I think he might be a buy low. He was my guy at wide receiver coming into the year, and he's still been good for fantasy, but he could be even better. The plays are there. It's just these little things that are getting in the way. So I'm not worried about Metcalf moving forward. He looks great. Kenneth Walker saw 8 targets, caught 8 for 37. And then he also added 14 for 32 on the ground. Luckily ran in a touchdown. And then Zach Charbonnet, the clear backup, 5 for 20 on the ground, 1 for 15 through the air. Oh, and then was it Laviska Shenault? Is he the one that ran back that? Yeah, so he had a 97-yard kickoff return touchdown, which was pretty cool to watch. But okay, that was my Thursday recap. And that's going to do it for this episode, ladies and jellyfish. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. As always, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe. Well, I don't know if you can like on every platform. I don't know if you can like, but make sure to subscribe. Make sure to follow wherever you're listening. If you're on YouTube or somewhere where you can like, make sure to drop a like on the pod and leave a comment or a review if you are able to, wherever you're enjoying the pod. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Good luck in week 6. Become a fantasy football prodigy. See you later. Peace and love. Thanks for the support and good luck. Bye.